This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the lab room.
The views and opinions shared on this program are that of Louie Tee and In the Lab Room alone and should be taken exactly as they are given. If you are soft, easily offended, or can't listen to the criticism of your team, this program is not intended for you. This is pure, unadulterated football talk for the hardcore fan. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this program, 2014 NFL Lab Reports. Today we're talking about the New York Football Giants, the G-Men. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Recently had some struggles with YouTube trying to upload videos. I'm back. You can't stop the movement, even though they tried. We're going to be talking about the New York Giants today, and we start with the strengths of this football team. Here's a team that struggled last year. Started the season 0-6, battled back, won 7 out of their final 10 games to make it a respectable campaign. And the reason they were able to do that was two things. And I'm going to separate them, yet I'm going to lump them all together. You get that? Maybe that makes sense to you, maybe it doesn't. But this Giants defense was pretty solid last year. And the pass defense was good, and so was the run defense a season ago. Here's a Giants team that collectively as a defense, it didn't seem like they were all that impressive. But if you take into consideration what the Giants were able to do defensively against the pass and against the run, and you put it together, you look at the totality of what they were able to accomplish, and this was a really solid defense last year, one that kept them from being a 3-13, a 4-12, a 5-11 football team. Pass defense wise, this Giants defense against the pass forced the 6th lowest passer rating in the National Football League, stopping teams from being able to throw the football all around the field. And again, points come through the passing game. We know this to be a truth in this league. I tell you that all the time. A wise man once told me, and so I pass on the knowledge to you. Points come through the passing game. In the National Football League, Giants only surrendered 21 passing touchdowns a season ago. That was good for 5th best in the league. So they were stopping the pass last season, and that is a reason why they were able to make a comeback at the end of the season and make it interesting in that funky NFC East last year. You look at the rush defense, and same thing. This Giants defense was solid against the run, 5th best in terms of yards per carry in the league, not giving it up on the ground. 3.8 yards per carry. Again, the benchmark in this league, 4 yards per carry. As a offense, that's what you're looking to accomplish. Giants were giving up 3.8, so they were keeping teams under that threshold. And again, Giants were very dominant against the run at times, not surrendering a 40-yard gain on the ground last season. One of 5 teams in the league to not surrender a run of 40 yards or more the entire season. So this Giants team, they kept the football in front of them. They made teams work for everything they got defensively. And this team, which was held together by a stick of Bazooka Joe, a paperclip, a thumbtack, and a rubber band, was held together by this defense. If not for the defensive play of this football team last season, this is a 3-13, 4-12, 5-11 football team. But because this defense was able to hold it together, pass-wise and rush-wise. This team ended up 7-9 last season. So you go from those strengths immediately to the weaknesses for the New York Football Giants. So the weaknesses of this Giants football team saw them start the season 0-6. And there's a reason you start the season off with 6 consecutive losses. It's because of weaknesses like the ones I'm about to explain. First things first, turnover differential. Giants were minus 15 in the turnover differential category. You cannot be that negligent with the football or else you're asking for trouble. We talk about this all the time. It's one of the unwritten rules. It's one of the things that you don't talk about because it is assumed that if you do not win the turnover battle, you're not going to win the game. Now, teams win games all the time when they don't win the turnover battle, but that's not something that you want to practice. That is a bad habit that if you go out and achieve, you will lose 95% of the time. There is a small window of opportunity that you have in this league to win when you turn the football over, and the Giants turned the football over way too much last season. And so going from there, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. That is a very self-explanatory weakness. Minus 15 in the plus minus turnover category will get you every time. You go to the next weakness. And for as good as the Giants were against the pass last year, their passing offense was equally as bad. Eli Manning probably was the worst quarterback starting-wise in the National Football League last year. And for all of the flack that people give Eli Manning and for all of the things he's done throughout his career, 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback, 2-time Super Bowl MVP, for all of the good things he's done, last year was probably the most disappointing season I've seen from Eli Manning. And he's had some disappointing seasons. But last year, I sat on this program. You know what? We'll talk about that later. I'm not going to talk about it now. We'll talk about it later. And so him throwing 29 interceptions last year, leading the league in interceptions, that was very disappointing. And the Giants were the worst at turning it over via the air last year with 29 interceptions. Can't have that happen. This Giants team, as a passer rating, and again, you turn it over, you throw interceptions, your passer rating is going to be dragged down. And their passer rating was among the worst in the league last year. They didn't get it done when they were supposed to on third downs. This team struggled throwing the football. The offensive line was a huge part of that. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. But this passing game was bad a season ago. So was the rush offense. And here's a Giants team that, because of the injuries and the lack of production from this offensive line, they found it hard to rush the football. And it was just bad at the running back position last year. I mean, anytime you got to go on the street and drudge up Peyton Hillis as your running back, and the Giants just had so many people in and out. They had to go get Brandon Jacobs off the street. It was bad at the running back position last year. It was so bad. And I'm a Redskins fan. And it was so bad, I said, man, this has got to stop, New York. Like, it was to the point where I was like, I wouldn't wish this on anyone. And again, I'm in the division watching this team struggle week in, week out, trying to find a back to put on the field. They were hitting the streets hard, trying to figure out who could come in and help them rush the football last year. It was bad. It was ugly. It was terrible. And so they couldn't run the football. Eli Manning didn't help out them running the football with his struggles throwing the football. And so it was just a very ugly situation offensively as a whole for this Giants football team. And then you move on to another weakness for this team. And it was the inability to get to the other team's quarterbacks. And it's funny because I remember when this Giants defense was known for getting to the other team's quarterback, and they didn't get to the other team's quarterback last season. And that's what made the Giants pass defense all the more impressive, was because they didn't get any help from the front seven. Keep in mind, Justin Tuck had 10 sacks last year. Might have been 10 and a half. Either way, this Giants team as a whole only had 34 sacks. So one man had a third of your sacks. And again, about 6 of those sacks probably came against the Washington Redskins themselves. So just think about how bad this team was at getting to the quarterback if one man had a third of your sacks. And about 2/3 of those sacks came in about 2 contests throughout the season. So this team was bad at getting after the quarterback. And that just makes how good they were against the pass last year that much more impressive. These are all things that the Giants, if they want to improve upon that 7-9 mark from a season ago, are going to have to do better moving forward into the 2014 season. You go from these weaknesses to camp battles in New York. As you can see behind me, I've got the assistance of my big board. Camp battles, experiments will be broken down with this big board. And so we jump right into the camp battles. And let me get this one out of the way because I really didn't want to talk about this one per se because it's such a garbage camp battle. But it's one nonetheless. I can't leave it out. And just know this. The Giants are going to rely on Eli Manning to continue his streak of playing games and not missing any contests, because if he gets injured, if he gets hurt, if anything happens to Eli Manning, you think he's bad and how bad he's been performing over the last couple of years, or especially last year. If you think that's bad, you don't want to see what's behind him. Just know that much. The Giants would prefer to keep 2 quarterbacks, but because it's such a mess behind Eli Manning, they might be forced to keep 3. If I'm the Giants, I'm banking on Eli Manning staying healthy, and I'm just keeping 2 quarterbacks. You got a quarterback backup battle here, Ryan Nassib versus Curtis Painter. And essentially, you got 2 guys here that are battling for that backup quarterback position. If the Giants keep 3 quarterbacks, then both of these guys, of course, will make the roster. I'm assuming the Giants are going to keep 2 because they want to be able to have flexibility to keep an extra guy here or an extra guy there. So I'm thinking it's Ryan Nassib's job to lose. They want him to win this competition. They drafted him last season. They want him to be the heir apparent to the throne, or at least be a competent backup, because I think he's already proven, at least to me, I can't speak for anybody else, he's proven that he's not a starter in this league. He's struggling to pick up concepts. He's not showing the ability to be a starter in this league. And so 2 offensive coordinators in 2 years will slow down the process of a guy, being better, but doesn't matter. I haven't seen anything to suggest that this kid could start at this level, but maybe he could be a competent backup. The Giants hope so. They'd hate to waste a draft pick, but you got to be able to say to yourself at some point, if you made a mistake and you realize you made a mistake, you just got to say, we got to move on. And so Curtis Painter, to me, has looked better throughout the preseason, but that doesn't mean that Ryan Nassib hasn't been practicing well and hasn't been performing in a way that will allow the Giants to want to keep him around. Look, it's an ugly situation. Honestly, just pick a guy. Whoever doesn't make your roster most likely will not find themselves on another NFL roster. If Ryan Nassib doesn't make your squad, maybe he might get picked up by someone else. Maybe. But if not, you can sneak him onto your practice squad and no one else will blink an eye. Same with Curtis Painter. He's been in this league. You can't put him on the practice squad. He's been in the league too long. But I'm pretty sure if you let Curtis Painter go, you can put him on speed dial. And if anything happens to Eli Manning, you can call him up and tell him to come back to New York. Maybe somebody might pick him up. Maybe not. Honestly, just pick a quarterback at the backup position. That's a backup battle that is really, really bad. Wide receiver. Let's talk about something that really matters. Wide receiver, 9 for 5 is what it looks like in New York right now. Victor Cruz, Ruben Randall, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarrell Jernigan, Trenton Holiday, Corey Washington, Marcus Harris, Preston Parker, and Mario Manningham are your 9 receivers. Let's cut to the chase. Victor Cruz. You got Victor Cruz. He's not going anywhere. Neither is Ruben Randall. Odell Beckham Jr., ODB, hasn't played yet. However, he's not going anywhere. And Jarrell Jernigan, I think it's pretty safe to say he will be on this roster as well. So take those 4 guys out of the discussion. You got 5 receivers for one roster spot is the way I look at it. I don't think, as a Giants fan, I think you can pretty much assume that you're not keeping any more than 5 receivers. And I don't think there's a need to keep any more than 5 receivers. And so maybe you could keep 6. I think 5 is the more logical option here. Trenton Holiday only provides one thing, and that's special teams prowess. Last year, he struggled holding on to the football, fumbled it a ton. I don't see how he makes this roster. The Giants don't have enough depth at receiver where they can just say, hey, and on the roster, period, they don't have enough depth to just keep a guy around that's just going to do one thing and one thing alone, and that's return kickoffs and punts. No way. He can't make this roster. Corey Washington offers you something that you currently lack with this group, and that is elite size at about 6'4". The undrafted rookie free agent has a legitimate shot at making this roster. Made a big play in a Hall of Fame game, scored another touchdown against the Steelers. I think this kid has a legitimate shot. And with Odell Beckham Jr. being down, people are getting opportunities to make plays. Marcus Harris made some plays last week. Another guy that's looking to try to make this roster. He made some plays in that Hall of Fame game against Buffalo. Preston Parker is a guy that has spent all of his career in this league with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was out of football last year, getting an opportunity to play. Maybe he can make this roster. I don't see it happening. And Mario Manningham, he was the favorite to make this roster. If you would have asked me when they went out and re-signed this guy, if he was going to be on this roster, I would have told you the Giants were set at receiver. They had their 5, and the other guys were just going to be vying for roster spots somewhere else around the National Football League, just looking to put some good footage on tape. But with him coming back and him dealing with these knee injuries, he's just not right. And he hasn't been practicing that much, and in the games he hasn't been performing much. I don't see him making this roster. I really don't. If his knees can't hold up, I could easily see him fading to black in this league and just not having a career in the National Football League. After 2 dead seasons in San Francisco, coming back to the Giants, you can either go home or you can go home, and it looks like he's about to go home. And so if you ask me, Corey Washington has made a name for himself, and he has the one thing you can't teach, which is height. So I think he's got a legitimate shot at making this roster. Marcus Harris, I wouldn't count him out either, but I think it's between those two as to who will secure that final roster spot at the receiver position. You move on to tight end. What a disappointing battle this has been, because the Giants really wanted Adrian Robinson to separate himself from the rest of this group. This tight end out of Cincinnati was called and dubbed the JPP of the tight end position and has yet to tap into that potential. And honestly, he's starting to look a lot like JPP at the tight end position. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Adrian Robinson was the guy that you wanted to win this battle. He is struggling mightily. Larry Donald is another guy that is in the mix. Daniel Fells. It looks like he's probably going to start, which is amazing because he's a journeyman tight end. He's been around the block a few times. Spent some time in St. Louis. I think he was even in New England at one point. He's been around the league. And to see him land in New York, a guy that you probably looked at as an afterthought, he's probably going to end up starting if Larry Donald can't beat him out. So we'll see. And Kellen Davis is another guy you brought over from Seattle. Big 6'7" target, but just never has really materialized into anything more than a guy that can block and catch an occasional pass in this league. That's a messy situation at tight end. The way I see it, just pick a guy and just move on. I mean, none of these guys have stood out. None of these guys scare anyone in this league. Pick one, move on. It's an ugly situation at the tight end position for the Giants. You look at fullback. With your new offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo, at the helm, calling the plays, it could seem like maybe the fullback could be an extinct position. With all of these tight ends, you think the Giants could have some versatility, move some of these guys around, have them line up in the backfield and block. But I think the fullback position will be upheld in New York, and it's a 2-man race. Henry Hynoski versus John Connor, the Terminator versus the Hinoceros. And when it's all said and done, the Hinoceros, I think, gets the nod. He's been in New York. He's a fan favorite. He's a guy that can still get it done, can block, can catch the occasional pass. I think he'll hang on to his roster spot in New York if it comes down to he and John Connor for one fullback spot. You move on to the offensive line. I think this is the biggest off-season revamp job right here. This is where, as a Giants fan, you need to be paying the most attention to, because this is the key to your football team. If these 5 guys, you got to find 5 guys. That's the first part of the puzzle, is finding 5 guys that you trust to protect Eli Manning and open up holes in the running game. If you can't figure out what's going on at the offensive line positions, you will not be a good football team this season. End of discussion. There's nothing else to talk about. So you've got to figure out who's going to play where. Guys have got to stay healthy. You've been dealing with a lot of injuries in camp already. So let's just run down the list of the guys that are probably going to make this roster and how they fit into the equation along this offensive line. J.D. Walton, here's a guy that spent a lot of time with the Denver Broncos, was with the Redskins last year, and now is in New York. He's a center. He can play guard, but he's naturally a center, and that's where you're going to be looking to play him if all else fails. And I think that I've heard that Eli Manning really loves J.D. Walton and his ability to call the game and the way he sees things from the center position, and I'm thinking that he's going to be your starting center if healthy. Weston Richburg is a guy you drafted in the 2nd round out of Colorado State in the 2014 NFL draft. A guy that can play center, can play guard. You've had him at the guard positions because of all of the injuries and having to shuffle things around. He's naturally a center, but you might have to play him at guard initially. We'll see how that works out. Will Beatty is the guy you paid money to a season ago as your left tackle. He's been banged up in camp, and so you're counting on him to be a veteran presence on this team. He has to stay healthy. He's been dealing with injuries in camp. He's got to get healthy, be an anchor at left tackle. He's got to play better because he didn't play that well last year anyway. He's got to play much better in 2014. Justin Pugh is a tackle that you drafted out of Syracuse 2 years ago that you're hoping can come in and solidify that right tackle position. Maybe he can play left tackle at some point in his career. I think that he's more naturally suited to play right tackle. You're hoping that he's holding it down at right tackle and Beatty is holding it down at left tackle, and that you don't have to worry about the tackle position. Charles Brown is another guy. You brought him in for depth. From the St. Louis Rams, he's the guy that, or excuse me, the New Orleans Saints. He's a guy that played for the Saints, had a chance to start out there, couldn't hold down that position, and I think he solidified himself as a backup in this league. You're looking for him to come in and provide depth for you, and he will do that. Jeff Schwartz is a big free agent acquisition from Kansas City. He was a journeyman offensive lineman. Time in Minnesota and Carolina before finding a home last season in Kansas City and performing very well for the Chiefs. As a guard, you're looking for him to come in and solidify one of the guard positions along this offensive line. And I think he will do that. Again, guys have to stay healthy. If Schwartz is able to do that, he will be one of your starting guards. Brandon Mosley is a guy that is going to come in and compete at one of the guard positions. He's performed well in camp thus far. Looks like he's going to steal a roster spot and perform at the guard position for you. John Jerry is another guy you brought in as a veteran from the Miami Dolphins. He's been around the block with the Dolphins, spent all of his time in Miami. He's coming in as a guard, going to give you depth. He's not a guy you want to start per se, but will provide you with depth along this offensive line. And Eric Herman is a young guy that has been suspended for the first 4 games of the season. If the Giants really like him, he'll be on this roster despite being suspended for the first 4 games of the season. If he does not perform well enough, that 4-game suspension could be enough to get him canned off of this roster. We will see how it shakes out. But if you're the Giants, I think what you might have to do is go with Pugh at right tackle and Beatty at left tackle, J.D. Walton at center, Weston Richburg at one of the guard positions, and Jeff Schwartz at the other guard position. I think that's going to be your 5 starters along this offensive line. We will see how things shake out. Again, injuries could change. This whole thing is subject to change. This is your most important camp situation. You need to figure out the offensive line. Running back. I think there's one more spot on this team at running back with the retirement of a guy that I thought could help change the game if he could stay healthy, if he could stop fumbling. Of course, I'm talking about David Wilson. A really tough situation to watch him have to hang his cleats up after only being in the league 3 seasons. But again, you got to take care of yourself and your health first and foremost. And I heard Chris Collinsworth describe the scene at the Giants training camp and him sitting, lying on the field, twitching, and it really couldn't control his movements. That's scary. So he had to hang up his cleats. What that does is it opens up a void at the running back position. I think the Giants were going to keep 4. He was going to be one of those 4 running backs. With him no longer being on the roster, I think that opens up a roster spot for a running back. And I think it's just these 2 guys, Michael Cox and Kendall Gaskins. Michael Cox, to me, it's hands down his job to lose. He's a guy that stands out on special teams and can run the football. He's been on this team for the last 2 years. I don't see him going anywhere. I think he's going to be your 4th and final back on this football team. Another man against man battle at the kicker position, Josh Brown versus Brandon McManus. Josh Brown is a guy that kicked the ball very solidly for you last season. And it's a situation where you're just looking to upgrade a position. For no other reason than, hey, this kid is younger, stronger leg. Why not give him an opportunity? If Brandon McManus comes in, kicks the football well, shows well on kickoffs with touchbacks, as well as being able to kick some deeper field goals, Josh Brown's job could be in trouble. If Josh Brown just continues to be solid and McManus doesn't stand out enough, Josh Brown will remain your kicker in New York. You go on to the cornerback position. And to me, this is the best position on your football team. This could be one of the best cornerback situations in the National Football League. This could be one of the best secondaries in the National Football League if this Giants team plays up to their potential in the secondary. Now, I said all of that to say this. Guys have to step up. This unit has to gel together. There are a lot of new pieces back here at the cornerback position. And so if they can gel together, and you need to get pressure on the quarterback, we'll talk about that a little bit later, these guys could really do some damage in 2014. Prince Amukamara, DRC, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, Walter Thurman, Zach Bowman, Tremaine McBride, Jerron Hosley, Bennett Jackson, and Charles James. Now, all of these guys aren't making the roster, of course. You're not keeping 8 or 9 corners. Now, here's the situation. Prince Amukamara going to be on this roster. DRC going to be on this roster. Walter Thurman going to be on this roster. Zach Bowman going to be on this roster. And Tremaine McBride probably going to be on this roster. So now that's 5 corners right there. Jerron Hosley, suspended for the first 4 games of the season, has struggled mightily in camp and in the preseason. Could he possibly be on the chopping block? I don't know. I don't think he's going anywhere. But this is the thing. You drafted Bennett Jackson out of Notre Dame, guy that can play special teams really well and offer you some depth at cornerback. And Charles James is a guy that you gave a look to last season, played about 4 games or so for you. And so he's a guy that might be able to help you in the returns game. He muffed the punt against the Steelers. That's not a good look for him, but he might be able to make this roster. I don't think he's going to be able to make it this time around. I think it's either Jerron Hosley or Bennett Jackson going to be your last cornerback. If it were up to me, I would like to see what Bennett Jackson does in camp and in the preseason. If he performs well enough, then he'd get an opportunity. If not, then you just stick with Jerron Hosley and keep it moving. So that's something to keep an eye on. Those are all your camp battles in New York. We move on from there to, of course, the experiment, which I have dubbed the belly of the big blue beast. Belly of the big blue beast. And this has been the only team in the NFC East to win a championship in the last 2 decades almost. I mean, the Cowboys were the last team outside of the Giants to win a Super Bowl, and that was all the way back in 1995 or 1996, as a matter of fact, against the Steelers. So this Giants team has been the only football team good enough to make noise out of the NFC East division. And so they are the beast. But right now, this team doesn't resemble anything like the team that won in 2007 or 2011. Can they get back to that? I don't know. Let's talk about this experiment, and we start with the research question. Will a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive line, and a new year be enough to change the fortunes of Eli Manning and the New York Giants? It's a lot of change in New York. This offensive line, I've already talked about them being revamped and this thing looking totally different. And you get a new offensive coordinator, Kevin Gilbride, retires, hangs it up. And so now Ben McAdoo is thrust into a situation he's never been in before, never called plays a day in his life. At one point was even a defensive guy. So this is all brand new to him. And so it is the change of the calendar in the National Football League enough for Eli Manning to put the past behind him and start anew and have a better season? And can this Giants team rebound from that incredibly disappointing campaign of 2013? We will see. Let's look at this hypothesis. If Eli Manning and the offense as a whole is better, all the while the defense continues to improve, then the New York Football Giants can top the dysfunctional NFC East. This division is wide open. It always is. There is no dominant nor definitive winner in this division. It's not like some of these divisions out here where there's a clear-cut leader in the clubhouse and everyone else is vigorously chasing after them, like New England in the AFC East, like Denver in the AFC West, like the Indianapolis Colts in the AFC South. That's not the case here. There's 4 teams in this division, and any one of these teams can jump up and win this division. It is wide open. And the Giants, they need to make some wholesale changes and improvements in order to put their name atop this division. But they're not that far away because this division is so wide open. Because there are so many question marks in this division, the Giants could easily assume control of this division. But it starts along the offensive line and the defensive line, and it starts with Eli Manning and his ability to get it done. We'll talk about that here in a second. Speaking of which, materials needed for this Giants team to get back to the postseason, something they haven't been able to do for the last 2 years. I believe in Eli. I think. Let's talk about this for a second, because last year, in this very chair, at this very same point, right before the season started, I sat here and I went off for about 10 minutes on why Eli Manning was a good quarterback and why everybody needed to get off his back. And yes, we had the whole Eli Manning is elite debate, and I sat here and I told anybody that would listen that this man was elite. And after last year, you've got to question whether Eli Manning is even a competent quarterback in this league. Now, look, he's got 2 Super Bowls. Look around the league at the other 32 starters. Tell me how many of those guys has 2 or more Super Bowl rings. His brother doesn't even have that under his name. So he can play football. There's no doubt about that. But he's got to play with more confidence. He's got to be smarter with the football. Look, even if the offensive line in front of him is terrible, he cannot turn the football over. We saw in the Hall of Fame game, he was loose with the football, tried to run away from a sack, got hit, ball came gushing out, spurted right out. What are you doing? Put the football away. You've been in the league too long to make mistakes like that. That's a very avoidable turnover. Pressure coming in your face. No more no-look Eli Manning specials. You threw too many picks last season. If it's not there, eat a sack. I guarantee you your defense would much rather have you punt the football on 4th down than throw a pick on 3rd down. I guarantee it. I believe in Eli. The question is, does Eli believe in Eli? Does this football team believe in Eli? Do the Giants fans believe in Eli? We'll see. It starts up front with the offensive line protecting him, because if they don't protect him, nobody will believe in Eli Manning. Do what you Maca do. Do what you Maca do. This is a big one. Ben McAdoo, your offensive coordinator, I talked about this briefly a second ago, has never called plays a day in his life in the National Football League. Limited experience. He was a quarterbacks coach with the Green Bay Packers, spent time with Aaron Rodgers. That is some invaluable experience he got in Green Bay. However, it's one thing to work with the quarterbacks. It's another thing to actually call plays. This is a huge step for Ben McAdoo and an even bigger leap of faith by the New York Giants by putting him in this position and giving him the power of calling plays. And so we'll see how it turns out for the Giants because, again, this is huge. It's Ben McAdoo's job to put ODB, Odell Beckham, and Ruben Randall and Victor Cruz in positions to make plays. There's no more Hakeem Nicks in this offense. So, and look, Hakeem Nicks wasn't all that great last year, I know, but he was still a big play guy, still someone that could make things happen when healthy, which seemed to be never, but doesn't matter. Ben McAdoo has to take the resources that he has and make it work because I really don't like your running back position right now. There's no one in that backfield that scares me. Andre Williams looks like he has some potential, but again, this backfield looks a little suspicious. You have depth, but you don't have any guy that hits home runs, that scares you as a defense. You're going to have to make that running game work. You're going to have to make these tight ends work. That looks to be a god-awful group of tight ends. Going to have to make it work. I don't even know if the tight end that ultimately ends up being your starter is even on your roster right now. It's so bad at tight end. You might go hit in the streets after teams trim the fat off their roster. You might actually go to the streets and try to find something to bring in and make your tight end. That's how bad it is at tight end. And then you got receivers that can play football, but you got to put them in the right spot. So it's going to be a tough task, but Ben McAdoo has to make it do what it McAdoo if this Giants team is going to take the next step and try to get back to the postseason in 2014. Identify the line. I talked about this offensive line, and man, has it been a whirlwind this offseason for this Giants offensive line. David Deal retires, so does Chris Snee. You shed yourself of some guys that have been dead weight along this offensive line and been hanging around. And so all of a sudden now, you go from a very experienced group that has gotten it done for you in the past. And what basically happened is you woke up. You woke up one morning. You looked around and your offensive line was old. That's what happened. You woke up one morning. You took a nice stretch and yawn, looked around, and everybody had gray hairs along that offensive line. And it's a shame when it all happens at once. You tried to infuse a little bit of youth with Justin Pugh, but it wasn't enough. You looked up and this offensive line was old overnight. And so now you got wholesale changes, and now you got to ask guys to gel together. Now you got to find 5 guys that can get it done like you used to have along this offensive line. Good luck. Good luck. It's going to be a tough task, but it's your job to identify the offensive line that can help you get Eli Manning and this running game back on track. Big Blue Sack Machine. I said I was going to talk about this a little bit later. Here we are. What in the hell happened to this Giants defensive line? I remember when this Giants team in 2007 got after the quarterback. They won in the Super Bowl. They did the improbable by beating the undefeated 17-0 New England Patriots because they could get after the quarterback. I remember annually this Giants team would get after the quarterback. If the Giants could do nothing else, they could get after your quarterback. I remember the Giants being a team that would draft defensive linemen for the sake of drafting defensive linemen just because they could. They always stayed ahead of the curve. They were one of the teams you say, why did they just draft that guy? They don't need another defensive lineman because they wanted to make sure they continued to get pressure on the quarterback. And I never understood it before. I get it now. It took me a while to figure out why the Giants used to do what they used to do in the draft. Even though you had Michael Strahan, even though you had Matthias Kiwanuka, even though you already had Justin Tuck, you still, and OCU and you still went out and got JPP. And initially, it proved to be a huge move that brought you back some huge dividends. But as time wore on, you stopped doing what you did best, which is get after the quarterback. You stopped drafting defensive ends. And even when you drafted DeMontre Moore, and I'm asking myself right now, why isn't he playing a bigger role on this football team? I'm watching him throughout camp, and I'm seeing him progress and get better. I watched him give the Bills' second-round pick, Cyrus Kwanjo, fits last week in the Hall of Fame game. I watched him beat a couple of these backup Pittsburgh Steelers tackles. When are you going to give him an opportunity to get some starter reps and to get in the game and make something happen? I think the guy's ready. What are you waiting on? Because I'm telling you this right now, Jason Pierre-Paul might never be the same. I don't even know if this guy's coming back. I don't know what happened, if the injuries have taken a toll on this guy, but that 16 and a half sack dude that we saw 2-3 years ago, I don't know if he's ever coming back. He's gone, and I don't know if he's ever coming back again. Just remember that. That might be a reality. I watched him struggle with a 7th-round draft pick of the Buffalo Bills. I said, oh, no Cordy Glenn in this Hall of Fame game? And I thought Cyrus Kwanjo would be the next guy up. Oh, no. Centrell Henderson, a kid with a lot of talent out of the University of Miami with some off-the-field issues. He got the starting nod. I said, man, JPP better work this young boy over. Christen him and welcome him to the NFL. Oh, you healthy now? Show me. He didn't show me a damn thing. He got his ass mollywopped by Centrell Henderson. Stonewall. So, I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Big Blue Sack Machine. You got to find some sacks somewhere. And I don't know where you're going to get them from. I don't see Jason Pierre-Paul stepping up. Justin Tuck is gone. He's long gone, and he's not coming back. And neither is his 10 sacks. You only had 34 as a team. 10 of those sacks are in Oakland right now. You got to figure it out. You need to figure out how you're going to get pressure on this quarterback. Because I don't know. And Matthias Kiwanuka being relegated to the defensive line and not having to worry about playing 18 different positions, I don't know if that's going to help you or not. Just know this much. The success of your defense predicates on you being able to get to the quarterback. And I don't know if you can like you used to anymore. Stomp them out. Stomp them out. Remember when that used to be stomp their ass? Remember, but because of Michael Strahan becoming politically correct and him landing a gig on Good Morning America or whatever daytime morning show he's on, and Regis and Kathy Lee, or Regis and or Kelly and Mike, whatever the hell the show is called, and him being a public figure, he had to clean it up a little bit. Now all of a sudden it's stomp them out. It used to be stomp their ass. But whatever, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the message is the same. You got to start stomping out some teams. And I don't know how you're going to do it. If this offensive line is going to step up, the defensive line is going to start getting pressure. I never have liked your linebacking core, and I still don't. I still don't like your linebacking group. Your secondary looks really impressive. But can they gel together? We shall see. I just know this much. If the Giants are going to get back to relevancy in the NFC conference, and more importantly in this division, they're going to have to show some toughness. They're going to have to be able to run the football. Eli Manning is going to have to be able to throw it. And you're going to have to be able to smack some teams in the mouth getting after other teams' quarterbacks. It's really simple. You're going to have to stomp out some football teams to get back to the postseason. Good luck, because with all the changes in this offseason, you're going to need it. You move on to the independent variable, offensive line and pressure. This offensive line, I talked about it. I'm not going to harp on it that much longer. This offensive line has to step up. If they don't, then you won't as a football team. And pressure, I just talked about it several times. this team needs to get pressure on the quarterback. This Giants team isn't the same. This franchise isn't the same if you're not getting pressure on the quarterback. And so that takes us to our dependent variable, Eli Manning and turnovers. If the offensive line isn't providing protection, then Eli Manning is a liability. And guess what? Eli Manning is going to take this team wherever they're going to go. If Eli Manning struggles, so does the New York Football Giants. If Eli Manning is successful, is able to do what Ben McAdoo has set out for him, and that's have a completion percentage up around 70, not turn it over that much, get back to being a quarterback that is feared around the league. If he does that, then this Giants team will be one that is feared around this league. If this offensive line does not hold up, if you can't find the right mix of guys, if you can't stay healthy, if you start to have to tap into that depth that looks a little shaky at this point, then you will be in trouble, and so will Eli Manning. And turnovers. This is something that the Giants need to make sure that they continue to do. They forced some turnovers last year, but not enough, obviously, because you turned it over so many times offensively. Can't turn it over. Last year, as a team running the football, you had 12 fumbles. You can't do that. Can't turn it over. Not when Eli Manning is out throwing 29 interceptions. You can't also fumble 20 or 12 times. Can't happen. And so you've got to force turnovers and take care of the football. And if you get pressure on the quarterback, the turnovers will come, especially with how talented you are in the secondary, getting Stevie Brown back and having Antrell Roll back there in the secondary, guys that will pick the football off. DRC is back there. Walter Thurman, one of the best slot corners in the league. You've got guys that will make plays on the football if you're getting pressure on the quarterback. But trust me, trust and believe. It doesn't matter how good your secondary is. If you don't get pressure on the quarterback, those guys aren't holding up for 5-6 seconds. I don't care how good they are. People are going to come open. Simple as that. The constant in New York, Eli Manning. Say what you want about Eli Manning. Call it what you want. I don't care what you call Eli Manning. The guy wins. And when he loses hard. But when he wins, they win Super Bowls. Yeah. The lows, man, they're really low, man. There's some bottomless pit lows. But when it's high, God damn it, you can't get much higher than when Eli Manning is playing at a high level. When he plays at a high level, he wins Super Bowls. When he plays at a low level, you ask yourself, how is this dude even related to Peyton Manning? How is he even conceived by Archie Manning? Because Archie, believe it or not, was a really good quarterback on some really bad football teams. We know Peyton Manning is one of the best to ever do it. Sometimes you got to ask yourself, how is he even kin to Peyton Manning? But when he's good, damn it, man, he's really good. And he's been a constant for the Giants. Whether it's been bad Eli, or good Eli, it's been Eli nonetheless. He plays, he suits up every single week. And so you got to ask yourself, where would this franchise be without Eli Manning? You can say what you want, but I guarantee you this. They wouldn't have 2 Super Bowl rings in the last 8 years without Eli Manning. Case closed. Conclusion. What does this all mean for the New York Football Giants? All of this change and all of this turmoil and all of the questions, there are too many of them. There's too many changes. There are too many questions. There's too many unknowns, too many injuries. 7-9. I said all of that to say this. 7-9. The same exact thing you did last year. I just don't see how everything comes together fast enough. I don't see how this big ball of clay is spun into a neat and a very aesthetically pleasing product, slid into the kiln, and comes out as a beautiful work of art. I just don't see how that happens this year. This is a mess right now in New York. It really is. It's a lot of sloppy stuff going on here. And it's just too much, I think, to fix in 1 year. Maybe next year you'll fix some more of it because it was a mess last year. That's why you started the season 0-6. I think that you're still cleaning up some of the messes from last year, and I think you got some more messes that you didn't see coming. You didn't see Chris Snead retiring. He waited way too late to tell you he didn't want to play football. Maybe you could have addressed some of your offensive line woes a little bit better had you have known, and you might have known, but he didn't know what he wanted to do. And so this whole situation, offensive line, tight end, no, your running back getting injured again, and you were hoping that he would be able to come in because he was the home run threat. He was the guy that you looked for big things from. And so now David Wilson having to retire, it just adds another question mark to your running back position. Your backup quarterback position. And again, if Eli doesn't get injured, we don't even talk about the backup quarterback position. But what if he does? It's just a lot. Ben McAdoo, never having called a play in the league before. A lot of questions, not enough answers. 7-9, 4, Big Blue. So that's the Giants lab report. I thank you for joining me. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. I thank you for joining me. Come back and join me tomorrow. Tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow when we'll be breaking down the Detroit Lions. See you then. Hopefully YouTube doesn't jerk me around. But come hell or high water, you will see this pretty face. See you then. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.